Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth. Written by the Hanged Man 317 and read by Purple Star. Chapter 7. 3 backpacks sat propped against the wall of Era's apartment, all in varying states of neglect. Era shoved another bottle of water into one of them, wincing as her phone vibrated from across the room. Shinsou again, certainly.
I don't want to talk to him.
No, that was a lie. She very much wanted to talk to him, actually. Which was why she very much couldn't. Things were getting dangerous, uncertain. Her emotions were beginning to rule her rather than the other, proper way round. And Era wasn't about to let a little thing like friendship drag her down. Not that they were friends, anyway. An image flooded her senses, unbidden, of Shinsou, battered and unmoving in the street. A hulking robot bearing down on him. With a strangled groan, Era straightened from the bag, cracking her neck before crossing over to the bed and throwing herself down to look at her phone. It wasn't Shinsou. It was a notification she had set up ages ago, alerting her to when police called in crimes in her area.
I should delete this.
To call Era's current frame of mind panic would be disingenuous at best, and downright slanderous at worst. No, she thought, fastening the mask to her face in the scratched-up mirror. She was certainly not panicking, just taking appropriate measures. Panic implied that there was nothing to worry about, and Era knew for a fact that there was always something to worry about. Always danger lurking past every corner and under every shadow. So it wasn't panic that led her to prepare no less than 3 emergency kits, should she need to run. Not panic that had her stocking up in gas and food using what little money she had, in case she needed to hole up in the apartment for longer than usual. And certainly not panic that left her feeling restless, flighty, sick to the stomach. That feeling around her neck, like she was being slowly, painstakingly strangled. It was not panic. It wasn't panic she felt when she left the UA entrance exam, when she knew she had failed. Her options had run dry. She'd put all of her eggs in this basket and dropped it off a goddamn roof. Her face was in the open, and she'd been sitting in one place for far too long. But she was not panicking. Era didn't let something like panic bog her down. She just focused on running away from her problems like a professional. She had standards. The cloak was comfortable around her shoulders. A weight like human contact, but not so constricting, not so threatening. Not for the first time, she felt the familiar sensations of fingers at her throat, slowly choking the life from her body as she twitched and writhed in helpless throes before she forced the dream memory from her mind. This would do her good, she decided as she eyed herself in the mirror. This would steady her. The cool breeze rushing past did lessen the ache behind her temples, and the sharp pains of fractured bone from every landing honed her thoughts past the hazy web of run, 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 and threat, 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 and
walls closing in, I can't breathe, I can't.
Her lungs swelled with the night air, and for brief moments between buildings, Era could almost believe herself weightless. There was a goal, a plan, a police report she had intended to follow, but all of that had slipped away with every step in her daring course over the rooftops. Instead, replaced by a clarity of mind that let her think, just for once. She had failed the entrance exam. She was sure of it. Her written score must have been abysmal, and she'd barely managed to scrape up any points in the practical. UA was a bust. This really shouldn't have hit her so hard. Shouldn't have made her fingers twitch and the scars crisscrossing her back burn. But something about it felt like being knifed in the dark. Felt like the gasping shock of a sucker punch to the gut. She'd failed. She could never be a hero, and she was foolish to ever think otherwise. Better to suffer this disappointment now than to get too invested in such a dangerous fantasy. Era winced, stumbling into an ungraceful landing. Okay. Maybe it still stung. Because even so, a lot of doors had been slammed shut on her already crooked fingers, and now she was trapped in an even worse situation than before. Suzuki Era existed, on paper, and applied to a high school. The address was just a P.O. box, and her quirk was a bunch of forged documents, and her name was just an alias, but nonetheless she existed. She was still and vulnerable, lingering for far too long. And now she didn't have the protection of UA, and its halls full of pro-heroes, eager to guide and defend their students. In short, she was fucked. Maybe she could stay close to Shinsou. He was a smart boy, and she was positive he'd get into at least general education. Some of that safety might rub off. If she disappeared, then he would know that she was gone. And he would have connections. It was just one more degree of separation, after all. But something about dragging him into this made her sternum throb with a bone-deep ache that had nothing to do with the lingering bruises from another nasty tumble onto a fire escape.
I destroy everything I touch. I burn it down. I burn it all down.
It was the dependence, she decided. Relying too much on kindness of what was effectively a stranger. Her thoughts were beginning to cloud again, and Era grit her teeth against the encroaching gloom that seemed to always be thick in her ears and pressed against the inside of her ribcage. Slowing the frantic patter of her feet, Era drew out her phone once more and began to scroll through the notifications. That initial report was definitely already dealt with, but that didn't mean there wasn't anything new. This was a dangerous neighborhood. Only long years of brutally honed instincts had her sliding to her knees, barely ducking beneath a swath of snapping gray fabric before pulling it back once more. "Give it a fucking rest already," she heard herself snarl, before she was able to rein in her already scattered emotions and scramble to her feet, pivoting to face her attacker. Eraserhead, obviously. Era sank back on one foot, eyeing her escape routes, even as she watched him draw his scarf back to the writhing mass around his neck, eyes giving away nothing beneath those godforsaken goggles. Fuck. Did she really think this man was cool? He was becoming more of a nuisance than anything else.
I could say the same to you.
He took one step forward, and Era gritted her teeth around the urge to rush forward and meet him, taking one step back instead.
Been busy lately?
Was he talking about her lack of activity? Sure, Era hadn't been donning the cape and mask quite so often, especially with the entrance exam coming up, but she hadn't thought it anything particularly novel. Everyone takes a vacation once in a while, heroes and villains alike. Although, in her case, vacation didn't seem like the most apt word. "You been stalking me, Eraserhead?" She put on confidence, fastened someone aloof and carefree tight around her face.
Make them underestimate. Make them think they know better. Let them think you weak and then destroy them for it.
She shook off those last thoughts, mask slipping before she tightened it once more. "I'm flattered, but you must have better things to do."
You're a child. I think it's natural to be concerned.
Era rolled her eyes behind her mask, making sure to accentuate the motion with a tilt of her head so she could be sure that he knew exactly what she was doing. "I can take care of myself. I don't need a fucking sitter. Either do your job and arrest me, or leave me the fuck alone."
Oh, I'm going to arrest you.
Big talk. All I'm seeing right now is an old man standing there and running his mouth.
You're chatty tonight.
I'm in a bad fucking mood. I like to take it out on others. She grinned at him, let it slip into something more feral, like bared teeth. He didn't flinch, which was disappointing but not unsurprising.
Something happen?
Scowling, Era fiddled with the knives at her waist. You're not my therapist, she snapped, before she could restrain herself again, feeling her finger slip along the edge of a blade and letting the sting force her back to her senses. We gonna fight or what? He still didn't move, regarding her with what could be boredom, although Era knew he would be on her the instant she began to flee. Fucking heroes. At last, he shrugged.
Even if I'm not a therapist, talking about it might help. Do your parents know you're doing this?
Hot, burning anger, searing lead through her veins that put knives in her hands beneath her skin, through her throat sharp, searing pain, because how dare he? Era felt herself start forward, felt her foot fall heavy against the rooftop, felt the weight of her blades flickering between her fingers, before she finally managed to still, to simmer, to cool down enough that she could fucking think. That, she managed, through the seizing of her throat, is none of your fucking business.
It kind of is, actually.
Something changed in the quality of his voice. It was still tired, still rough and brusque and terse, but beneath it there was a spark of interest. Of kindness, even, or something past kindness by which Era could not abide. I don't need your fucking pity, she spat. There were still lingering embers beneath her skin, and his words were only threatening to stoke them into a frenzy once more. He raised his hand as if to placate her, although instead the motion made her stiffen, because surely he was up to something. Surely there was a play here, a trick, a ploy, a threat beneath this guise of trust.
I'm not pitying you, kid. I'm trying to help you. But if you won't accept it, then I still can't just let you walk away.
Aw, shit. Here we go again.
For now, though, let's talk.
What?
He walked forward, and Era scrambled back alongst the rooftop, hands tightening around her knife spasmodically until it was clear that he wasn't advancing on her. His scarf was calm around his neck, and he settled down on a short wall edging the roof, giving her what she assumed to be an expectant look beneath the goggles. What makes you think I won't push you off? Era made no move towards him. She didn't trust herself to, with the stress of the last few days building to a fever pitch within her limbs. He scoffed.
Not exactly vigilante behavior. Besides, I'd like to see you try.
Eyes blazing, Era felt her mouth open with every intention of saying exactly what she thought of that. Saying how and in what way she could kick his ass and throw his broken body into the alleyway beyond. The image of him limp and lifeless, crumpled in the shadows, brought her jaw close with a snap. Arrogant besides, he was a pro-hero, and he'd managed to get the drop on her several times before.
Arrogance is weakness. Know exactly what you're capable of, and then execute on it. Failure is not an option. Failure is suffering.
She snarled through those thoughts, those voices, all clinging to her ears and clamoring inside her skull. And still he was staring, regarding, deconstructing. What happened to not letting me walk away?
I don't see you running.
She snorted. I'm always running. Fuck. This conversation couldn't happen. She was too much of an idiot to have it efficiently. That was a feeling she was having a lot in recent months. Like all of the valuable lessons her training had instilled in her were replaced by hot pain and a breathless sense of suffocation, leaving her stupid and careless and weak. He tilted his head, expression betraying nothing, even as Era stood rooted to the ground, muscles betraying her as her body found itself caught in a vicious battle between fight and flight.
What are you running from, then?
Fuck this and fuck you. She began to turn away, his questions enough to jolt her out of the fugue. There was no way in hell she was having this conversation. He could try to play therapist all he wanted, but she wasn't dropping her guard, and she most certainly was not going to spill her life story for a few sympathy points from the other side of a prison cell. The rustle of clothing behind her, an Era braced for an attack. Nothing came. She made it to the edge of the roof before he spoke again.
This isn't going to stop. Whatever you're running from, it won't just go away. Do you need help?
Fucking heroes. She tried and failed to choke back the words, whirling around to find him standing only a few feet away from her. And
when did he get so close?
I don't need your help. I don't need any help. I can take care of myself. Do the smart thing and stay away from me before someone gets hurt.
You're threatening me?
He didn't move. Didn't let any flicker of emotion run across his face. And even though Era strained to hear, she couldn't catch even the faintest touch of anger in his tone. I'm promising you. Desperation crept up her throat and threatened to infect her voice before she shoved it back down. Stay away.
You afraid of something?
This isn't an interview. Good night, Eraserhead. She slipped from the rooftop and into the alley below. He didn't follow. End of Chapter 7.